Happy to be here with you today. I want to start by telling you that when I was a little girl, I went to Catholic school at St. Michael's in Germantown, not too far away from here. And I remember very clearly learning about the Ten Commandments. When I turned to Buddhism and discovered the precepts, I thought, wow, this is cool. They also have rules. But I learned very quickly there were very distinct differences between the two. While I am grateful for my upbringing in the church, I do believe that Buddhism aligns more with my strong personal belief that we are all interconnected. And as such, we should care more about each other and for each other. Not just humans, but all sentient beings, and not focused on a God for salvation, but rather to look inward. It also became clear to me after reading the precepts in the Won scripture book, chapter 11, page 72, if you're wondering, that the first 5 commandments that I grew up learning have us placing a God above all else. Do not make false idols, as we were taught to light candles in front of statues, and do not take the Lord's name in vain. It was very confusing, and even more so now as I see people who profess these values that yet turn their backs on others in need, or who have different beliefs, or are just different. Instead, our focus is on the Won Song, which refers to an ideal state of being, which translates to this one circle, representing the interconnectedness of all things. Now I don't see the precepts as rules, but rather as guidelines for living a life with compassion. Therefore, I would like to talk with you about the Won Buddhist Precepts and how they guide me to be more compassionate. The best thing about these precepts is that the focus is not on a God or gods, but rather on how we as sentient beings can realize our true nature by transcending the boundary between self and others. I couldn't possibly go through all of them in one talk, but I can tell you they are broken down into 3 sections. The first is the 10 precepts of the ordinary grade. The second is the next level of 10 precepts of the grade of special faith. And the third, I guess considered the mastery level, are the 10 precepts of the grade of the battle between Dharma and Mara. My talk will be focused specifically on 2 precepts that speak to my soul. They are number 1, do not kill without due cause, from the first 10. And number 3, do not eat the flesh of 4-legged animals without due cause, from the 3rd group. One thing I would like to point out is that the phrase without due cause is very important and mentioned in every precept. In Won Buddhism, the phrase without due cause is added to the precepts to emphasize the importance of understanding the principle of karma, which states that all actions have consequences, and that causing harm without due cause is considered particularly harmful and goes against the ethical foundation. It encourages practitioners to carefully consider the motivations behind their actions and avoid unnecessary negativity. So some key points about the concept of without due cause in relation to cause and effect. Due cause refers to a justified reason or necessary for an action. By stating without due cause, Won Buddhism highlights that causing harm without a valid reason is especially problematic and can create negative karma. With regards to mindfulness and intention, the phrase encourages practitioners to be mindful of their intentions and motivations when making decisions, as even seemingly small actions can have significant consequences if done without due cause. And finally, nonviolence and compassion. By avoiding actions without due cause, Won Buddhists strive to live a life of compassion and nonviolence, minimizing unnecessary suffering in themselves and others. In Chapter 2, the Fourfold Grace, Section 3, the principle of indebtedness to fellow beings states, if we wish most easily to understand the grace we have received from fellow beings, we first must consider whether we could live alone in a place that has no people, no animals, no plants. Then anyone would acknowledge that it is not possible. If we cannot live without the help of fellow beings, the support of fellow beings, and the provisions supplied by fellow beings, then where would there be grace greater than that? Animals are our fellow beings, sentient beings. They are capable of love, joy, heartbreak, and fear. They nurture their young. They cry when they or their children are hurt or taken from them. Given space and freedom to live, they like to run and play and cuddle. They deserve our respect, our consideration, and our care. I stopped eating meat about 10 years ago, right about the same time I stopped dyeing my hair, because my kids said if I was going to be a grandma, I had to do it the right way, with gray hair. So I stopped coloring, but I also stopped eating meat because it's just bad for you, you know? Whether you believe it or not, both are very bad for you. Along the way, I learned a lot about myself. The way animals are mistreated for our consumption and entertainment, as well as the damage being done to our planet, due in part, if not entirely, to the mass production of animals. One thing I learned about myself is that I am capable of so much love. I love all the pets I've had over the years. I love, of course, my family, my children, my grandchildren. I love my students, my neighbors, my Dharma friends. The list goes on. So eating meat started to feel counterintuitive to me. How could I love completely if I was still paying for the slaughter of animals while cuddling with my dog on the couch? Didn't make sense. If I love Mother Nature and have concerns for the environment, endangered species, rainforest destruction, why was I still gnashing on the flesh of animals? If I worry for the future of my children, my grandchildren, and generations to come, how can I contribute to the overuse and destruction of precious natural resources, such as our forests, farmlands, and waterways? In addition to watching countless documentaries, I read tons of books, two very good books recently that I brought with me. One of those books is called Animal Kind. Remarkable, it's this book here if you want to look at it afterwards. Remarkable discoveries about animals and revolutionary ways to show them compassion. This book talks about the discovery that animals can feel love, grief, and pain, and explains the way we can show them compassion. Furthermore, I'd like to dispel some myths about our ancestors, the hunters and gatherers, who indeed did not have the means to hunt, but rather were hunted. Now, class participation here. Close your eyes. Go back in time, 50,000 years back. You're living in the Paleolithic age. You and your family are returning home to your cave after a long day of foraging in the nearby forests. It's very cold outside, but every day seems more frigid than the last. You enter the cave where you find other members of your family, the ones who are too sick or too young to forage, huddled around the fire for warmth. Everyone is hungry and looking forward to a good meal. What is on the menu? Plants and insects, my friends. You see, our ancestors were very much like us. They had molars, not huge fangs for ripping meat, and they have short nails, not long talons for catching prey, like predators such as lions. You see, we are most closely related to chimpanzees who sit in the forest all day eating leaves and plants. In fact, when was the last time anyone here ran through the woods hunting for their dinner? Anybody? We don't. We go to the grocery store and we have aisles and aisles of a variety of food. I heard someone say once, if a grocery store has a health food section, what is the rest of the store for? What's in the rest of the store? Food for thought. I could go on, but I am not here to persuade you. I chose to talk about this because it is very important to my mindfulness practice. I discovered that I can live without consuming animals or their byproducts, and the benefits are greater than I ever expected. By incorporating mindfulness into my diet, I now recognize that food nourishes my body as the Dharma nourishes my soul. Spiritual and physical nourishment combined helps me to create a peaceful, happy, and healthy life. Recently, I went on a trip with Linda and my friend Becky. We visited a used bookstore up in Eaglesmere, Pennsylvania, where I found a little book called The Compassionate Kitchen. I have that with me too if you want to see it later. It's written by Tibetan Chandran, a Buddhist nun from the Sravasti Abbey in Washington State. It's a wonderful little book which shows us how every aspect of our daily activities can be a part of spiritual practice, if done with compassion, and how eating mindfully can nourish the mind as well as the body. In Chapter 9, she speaks directly about the precepts, mainly how traditions vary among different sects and over time have changed with the spread of Buddhism around the world. I think we are all aware of the story of Buddha as a prince who lived richly until he decided to leave the palace in search of, essentially the meaning of life. He quickly realized that life was not perfect outside the palace walls and committed his life to finding the truth. On his journey, he renounced food to his detriment, realizing that going from one extreme to another is not the way, which is when he discovered the middle way. All this to say that some Buddhist traditions eat food that comes from animals because they are given it from members of their community. You may have heard of the receiving of alms. The Buddha allowed monastics to eat meat in most situations as part of the practice of accepting whatever was offered to them with gratitude. When Buddhism spread to China in Mahayana tradition, emphasizes love and compassion for all sentient beings, and all monastics became vegetarian. Venerable Chandran also shared experiences of two practitioners from the Abbey. One was from a man named Bob Wilson, who shared his relationship with food and how the Buddhist teachings have changed his life. He says, "We become what we think, we also become what we eat and what we do. Our moment-by-moment choices shape our entire life. This is the Buddhist notion of karma. Our actions influence who we are and what we experience. We never know what karmic seeds from the past will ripen, so we must continue to practice. As we choose to eat healthy, generate compassion, and pray for healing of all those who struggle with their own emotional and physical distress, we plant seeds for healing in the world and in our own lives." Venerable Chandran also shared that when we don't listen to our bodies, but let craving dictate what we eat and how much we eat, we don't feel good about ourselves. Physically, it makes us feel heavy and sluggish. Mentally, we feel unhappy with ourselves for being unable to withstand cravings and allowing it to run our lives. We need to reduce our craving and attachment slowly by seeing their faults and by realizing that things we crave don't have happiness inside them. The fulfillment and joy gained from spiritual practice and from abandoning craving is much greater. Food nourishes our body and is indispensable for good health. Likewise, reflection and meditation nourish us spiritually. Along with receiving teachings and offering services to others, reflecting on the Dharma is essential for our spiritual health. If I could, I'd like to finish by sharing a portion of the preface from The Compassionate Kitchen. The basic framework of Buddhism centers on the four truths: unsatisfactory conditions, their origin, their cessation, and the path to the cessation of all unsatisfactory conditions. Unsatisfactory conditions include aging, sickness, death, being separated from what is dear to us, not getting what we want, and disappointment in the long term, even when things go the way we want in the short term. The origins of this situation lie principally in our own minds. They are the three poisons of ignorance that misapprehends the nature of reality, clinging attachment that is greedy and self-centered, and anger that wants to harm those who cause us harm or interfere with our happiness. Since ignorance is erroneous, it can be counteracted by the wisdom that correctly realizes reality. Cultivating this wisdom is the core of the path, but other emotions and views need to be cultivated as well, such as ethical conduct that abandons harming others, the determination to be free from the cycle of constantly recurring problems called cyclic existence, love that wishes all sentient beings to have happiness and its causes, compassion that wishes them to be free of suffering and its causes, and meditative concentration that focus one-pointedly on virtuous objects. Bringing about this internal transformation in our minds and hearts requires learning, reflection, meditation, and of course, practice and time. Consideration of and respect for others are essential, and we value non-harmfulness, gratitude, humility, rejoicing at others' success and happiness, making amends for our misdeeds, and practicing forgiveness. Our most important value is compassion. If you are so inclined, pause for a minute and think about this, making examples of how to implement these values in your consumption of food. Thank you.